Okay, we're now going on to making the piping around the bottom. I'm using this silver polyester dupion fabric. It has the grain line going through it. It's shiny one side and matte the other. Okay, next fold the fabric to get the 90-degree angle, making sure you have a more or less straight edge as best you can possibly do. Now cut your fabric in half along the fold line. Okay, from this corner we've cut a strip 6 centimeters wide. Take your two ends and cut them off straight. Okay, next you want to start encasing your piping cord in your fabric. Use a special piping foot for your sewing machine and fold the edge of this fabric over to just nearly halfway. Don't fold it completely in half. And with your piping foot, just draw a sewing line down there just to encase it. Leave a bit at the end and the same the other end. Okay, after you've put your bone into your bone casing and hand stitched across the bottom of your liner, you then want to put it on you and have somebody pin across the bottom, pulling the fabric tight as you can, which is easier said than done. And you want to run a sewing line across the bottom as your guide for your piping cord to go on. So you'll just run that all the way along and then right through to the other end here. Okay, now take your piping cord at the one end, grab it and pull it about 2 inches, and then you just want to cut it. And just pull it back in a bit so that these last inch or 2 is quite flat. Okay, we're now going to start pinning our piping on. We need to start on the edge, very edge there, where the pipe, you can just feel that piping cord right on the very edge there, and the piece you left flat, go around the back like that. Okay. Because then you've got the V shape here, you need to cut into your piping at this point to help it stretch round, like so. Now you want to sew your piping on, again using the piping foot for your machine. Just remember to sew a little bit closer. This is the original line here where we just sewed it earlier, and then you just need to sew as close as you can to the piping without going through it. And when you get to the bottom here, you want to curve it a bit, so you just need to cut a couple of slits. And then when you come to the end, remember to do as you did the other side and to cut a slit there to allow it to bend. Also, you might have some excess fabric to cut off, so you cut it, leaving that couple of inches to fold under. You'll have some piping cord left. You just need to cut the piping cord down as you did earlier on and push it to about here so that this is flat. Okay, next you want to cut back that excess blue fabric and the organza to meet up with the grey line here where my thumb is. so. And then we will be pinning and turning under the piping so it ends up looking something like that. But I'll show you that a bit later.
Next thing we're going to do is put on our hooks and bars. I'm not going to do eyes because I prefer to do bars. First of all, I'm going to put my hooks on, almost reaching the end of the edge there, just short about 2 millimeters, and I've spaced these 2 centimeters apart. And then I'm going to put my bars on. Now the way you work this out is, first of all, start with the top one, and where it actually meets the fabric, put a pin there to mark it. And then for the next one, you put a pin to mark where it's going to go in relation to the first one, and so on all the way down. And because we want to have them evenly along the edge, you also put a pin going sideways, so basically making a cross shape with your pins so that you can keep them all the same distance away from the edge. I'll just take those out for now. Now we're going to do our bar tacks, which means getting a piece of thread and doubling it, and then putting a knot into the end. Now all my bar tacks are going to come up about 2 millimeters short of this cross, so approximately 3 millimeters on this side of the cross I'm going to come up, and then go down just on the other side. You don't have to make this tight, and then come up from the back again, and we're going to do this 3 times. Oh, got caught on the hook, sorry. Okay, now that we've done that, we can now take out the pins that were marking it and come up from the back to the beginning of your bar. Now you need to take your thread around in a circle. Now this may sound silly, but when you're working on sheer fabric like this, you're going to catch the threads if you use the sharp end of your needle. So use the eye end of your needle. Go up through the bar that you just made. Sorry, made a mess of that. And then pull that up, and you're going to create a loop there. Then pull that over to one side, and that is called a blanket stitch. Now take the thread around again, go through the bar, and then when you come up, just pull the thread over gently towards the first one. And we're going to keep doing this until the bar is full. Right, we've just done the last one now. So what I'm going to do is go down through the fabric where I finished, and then I'm going to go up and down about 4 or 5 times just to secure my thread. Good tug, and then on the back just snip it off, and there you go, those are your bar tacks. And this is what your hooks and bars look like when they're done up, which I think looks a lot better than the traditional hooks and eyes method.
Okay, the piping's been put on and finished, and this is what it should look like at this stage. And then all fastenings have been done down the back. Here I go! Okay, I'm now going to do the Bertha collar piece. Now this is just a practice I did earlier, and this was the pattern piece that came the Simplicity pattern. And you'll notice here it's got the line going diagonally, as you have to cut this piece on the bias. But also after a trial run I found that this piece wasn't long enough, so I've extended it bigger. My new piece is here. As you can see, I've made it about 5 inches bigger, so I added 2.5 inches to each end. I just made it a centimetre bigger around the top and the bottom. The piece now measures across the width nearly 82 centimetres. Height down the middle is about 66. This has to be done in 2 halves. For each halves you need 2 sections. You need your outer fabric and an inner. Ideally the inner layer should be a bit stiffer, but it doesn't matter too much. I've pinned them together to hold it because the organza cut on the bias has a habit of moving out of shape very easily. Okay, next you want to down one side is to run a gathering stitch. You want to anchor it well at the beginning, run your gathering stitch down to the end and leave 2 tails at the end. Just run it off the machine, don't go forwards or backwards, and you want it on setting number 4 for a long stitch. Next you want to actually fold this piece in half. Now you're going to be sewing a running stitch again across the top and then turning it inside out, so if you have a good side to your fabric you'll want to put good side to good side, which I have here. I have a slightly more shimmery blue that's going to end up on the outside. So just pin those together. Okay, so now you should have your gathering stitch down this edge with your tails to pull that one. And then starting at this end, I advise that you run your tails off the other end, otherwise you'll get confused which ends to pull when you come to pull your gathers. This end has been left open because it's going to be pleated. Just turn your whole piece the right way out, so now that your seam is on the inside. Now you've turned your oblong piece the right way out, you want to take one of those tails that you left earlier for pulling your gathers. Now you only need to get hold of one. Okay, so just hold in pretty tight with this hand. You're just pulling the gathers around the end of the tube. I want it pretty tight but not over bulky. Okay, when you've pulled your gathers in, I'm going to take those two tails. Obviously you've got one a bit longer than the other now. Just want to take those, just want to tie a couple of knots to secure the end, and then you can cut these off. Next you have to take the thread that you sewed your gathering stitch along the top of the bertha here that we did earlier. Start pulling on one of the threads, start pulling the gathers up. So again, just use your fingers, just pull on the cord, pull in the gathers further up as we go. At the moment I've sewn the front down, turning the edges in, and as you can see it's still rather long, so we just need to gather it in so that it fits into that space all the way around the top. Okay, next is where I start to play. I've already done this side, I've sewn that on. This took me about 2 hours just to do this side. Just takes a lot of pulling and puckering and pinning. And at the end here, obviously you've got to be able to get in and out of your bodice. I know that theirs was detachable, so you could detach theirs on and off. So what I've done is, I'll be showing you this in a bit anyway, how to do the pleats. And then on the underside here, sorry, I don't know if you can see there, I've just tacked it in place with some little stitches on the inside there, and then folded it over like so. You have to do this kind of off centre bit because obviously you do have the opening. Okay, I've now made a start on doing all the tucks and the little swirls. I've already hand sewn in place all those on this side. I'm now working on the other side. I've only gone to about here, and then we've got all this back open here. This is where it's going to be pleated, so it looks like the other side. Because the fabric slips around so much, it might be helpful to put some pins in to hold your edges together. You want to run a sewing line about 2 centimeters in, holding all your pleats in place. Okay, next on to the butterflies. I have a couple of templates here. One is a 4cm wingspan and one is a 3cm one. I've basically cut these all out by hand using as templates. I've used same organzas that I've used on the petticoats. So I've used blues and whites and purples and some of the holographic ones as well. And I actually went round the outside of the butterfly with some fabric glue so that it stiffens the edges, so the edges won't fray. And then I've hand painted some of these with Dial-On fabric paint. I've done some yellow ones because I noticed she has some yellow cotton ones on hers. And basically I've just run a blob of glue down the middle here, securing a craft wire in place, and then I've hand painted over that. For the back I've done a slightly different shape and a bit bigger butterfly. Okay, to attach the butterflies I've used a hot glue gun, and then using this as an example, you would run some hot glue down the middle and then just glue it on. Just hold it in place. Be very careful not to catch your fingers. Can be quite hot doing it that way, but that's what I've decided to do. Just give you a quick view. And the one in the centre back here, I've glued it on this side at an angle because I thought that looked really quite nice.